Before the Rings of Power, there were the Silmarils. Before Sauron, there was his master Morgoth. Before Aragorn and Arwen, there was Beren and Luthien. Join us as we explore Tolkien and all the ages of Middle-earth with your hosts from theonering.com, Jonathan Watson and Michael Grumbine.
Michael, I think we're finally allowed to say it. We're allowed to say Merry Christmas now that Thanksgiving is over.
That's right.
Season is here.
We held the line.
We held the line.
Although,
I did not listen to any Christmas music until today, which is like 4 days after Thanksgiving, in fact.
I'm even more hardcore, though, since there's a liturgical season called Advent that actually happens before Christmas in the older Christian traditions. So,
letter of the law, man. Letter of the
Orthodox. Law. It's a tradition. Orthodox, Eastern Christians, and Catholics. We have Advent, the season of awaiting. Christmas is actually the 12 days starting on Christmas, but whatever.
We'll take your bad with the good, I guess.
You're not listening to Christmas music before Thanksgiving. That causes me to throw objects.
Yeah, don't break the camera. We need you.
That's right.
Need you. So, but it is appropriate then that instead of doing our complete list of film changes, which it is nice to get a little break from every once in a while, because it's a lot to just go through all these film changes. And it's nice to have a change of pace. We thought it would be appropriate to take a little time this year to look at Tolkien's 1936 poem, Noel. Now, you may not be familiar with it because nobody was, in fact, familiar with this poem until the year 2013. And let me give you a little back history of how this was found. So Tolkien scholars Wayne Hammond and Christina Scull, I believe is how you pronounce it, Scull, they've been researching and pursuing Tolkien's works for years, for decades. And so in 2013, they found something that they didn't quite expect. It was in a February 1936 edition of The Tablet, a Catholic journal. So, give the Catholics their due for having journals that lasted that long from 1936 on till now. Wow, impressive. They did find that there was a reference to, quote, a poem or two in the Abingdon Annual of Our Lady School, which is a still active school in Abingdon, in fact, right now. So what they did is they were like, okay, a poem or two. And this was before The Hobbit. So they had nobody knew who Tolkien was at this point. So he just decided to give them a couple poems. And so they asked the school if they had a copy of this annual in their archive. They did not, but they did point them to a convent, I guess, called the Sisters of Mercy at Bermondsey, who did have the issue. Perhaps they knew that they would keep all the issues. They would send them there. So they found the issue. And first in it, they found an early version of a poem called The Shadow Bride, which was in this annual was called The Shadow Man, a poem that was found in the Adventures of Tom Bombadil. But then, surprisingly, they also found this, they said a poem or two. The second poem was the poem Noel by Tolkien. And we did last year, we did a video version of it with Austin Robertson reading it wonderfully. In fact, it sounds great with a little bit of music and some imagery. And if you look up like Noel Tolkien poem or something like that, pretty much on any search engine, you'll find the link to our page on here. But if you go to theonering.com/Noel, you'll also find it. And so in here, we have a little bit there. We have the YouTube video, and then we have the entire text of the poem here. And so we're going to talk about it a little bit. And we're going to play it right now. And you can also get it straight. I'll put a link to the video directly in the show notes too. But you can listen to it right now, right here too. And then we'll talk about it afterwards.
Grim was the world, and grey last night. The moon and stars were fled. The hall was dark, without song or light. The fires were fallen dead. The wind in the trees was like to the sea, and over the mountain's teeth it whistled bitter cold and free as a sword leapt from its sheath. The Lord of Snows upreared his head, his mantle, long and pale, upon the bitter blast was spread, and hung o'er hill and dale. The world was blind, and the boughs were bent. All ways and paths were wild. Then the veil of cloud apart was rent, and here was born a child. The ancient dome of heaven sheer was pricked with distant light. A star came shining, white and clear, alone above the night. In the dale of dark, in that hour of birth, one voice, on a sudden, sang. Then all the bells in heaven and earth together at midnight rang. Mary sang in this world below. They heard her song arise, o'er mist and over mountain snow, to the walls of paradise. And the tongue of many bells was stirred, in heaven's towers to ring, when the voice of mortal maid was heard, that was mother of heaven's king. Glad is the world, and fair this night, with stars about its head, and the hall is filled with laughter and light, and fires are burning red. The bells of paradise now ring, with bells of Christendom, and Gloria, Gloria we will sing, that God on earth is come.
Very nice.
Yeah, we generally, you don't want to hear our voice after listening to that, but we'll march on. But special thanks definitely to Austin Robertson, who did that, who you may have heard if you've listened to the Babylon Bee. He does all their voiceovers too. And you can get to him.
Can I say
Austin.
too, Jonathan, you did a fantastic job with the visuals on that, on the slides,
Thanks.
The verse by verse visuals. Very nice.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, go to austinrobertsonvoice.com if you want to check him out there and do that. And in fact, we may have a treat from him again this Christmas season, another Tolkien Christmas tidbit that will be coming out later this year, which isn't very long if you look at your dates.
No, it's from one of my favorite Tolkien tidbits, but we won't say any more until it launches.
That's right. So I thought we could take a look at the poem, and it has, if you've read Tolkien's Lays, right, it has the standard A-B rhyme like a lot of it does, or not Lays, but a lot of his poetry does. But it also contains, the reason that they knew it was Tolkien was one, well, because they said it was in there, even though it wasn't necessarily said this was by J.R.R. Tolkien, but it had his standard visual imagery, right? Grim was the world and gray last night, and a lot of the alliteration too. So there were the markers of something that Tolkien wrote throughout this, and when they came across it, it seems almost like an afterthought to them. It's like, hey, yeah, this was a neat poem, and it's sort of taken on a life of its own. And I don't think I really read it until probably 4 or 5 years ago, because I hadn't relaunched the site, and I wasn't really involved in much in the world of Tolkien at that time, unlike the 10 years around the films. But what did you think, Michael, when you first read it, when you came across it, when you found it?
It was fantastic. That's why I loved it. So the poem is 5 stanzas, and the first 2 are very much until the last line of the second stanza, which was, then the veil of cloud apart was rent, and here was born a child. Until that, line, it just looks, it sounds like a description of something in Middle Earth. Actually, it's a gray world. It's a grim world, and it has those overtones of sort of the Nordic hall, the focus on the harshness of the geography, but also sort of a cleanness and harshness. It references the Lord of Snows. It can be a reference to simply a anthropomorphization of the weather, which is often the case in those cultures, but also the Nordic gods, and it's very much could be a poem from Middle Earth until the last line of the second stanza, and then it takes a shift, and the next two stanzas are very, very Christocentric, but they're focused on song, which again, there's a Tolkien marker, right? Because when does he not have? I mean, he's writing a poem, but even in his poem, we have people singing. This is our joke in this podcast: is Tolkien can't go a chapter or apparently even a poem without someone singing it, and this is true here, which is both Mary sings and then the bells sing, so, and then the final one is the final stanza, which is just beautiful. It's a parallel to the first stanza, but instead of the world being grim and gray and the stars fled, the world is glad and fair and the stars are about its head. And instead of the hall being dark and without song or light and the fires being dead, the hall is filled with laughter and light and the fires are burning red. And so you've got this catastrophic sort of event happening, and then we see this happy result. And Tolkien was known for his depth and also the sorrows of his world, that which, as many have reflected, was something of a reflection of his own life too. He was a very melancholic sort of soul, and but I love how this poem. This is definitely a poem of hope, and it's ending on a triumphal note. Not it's a poem that curves upward towards hope and triumph.
Right, and it has, and it has. I think, speaking of what we talked about it on Fairy Stories, it has the ultimate eucatastrophe, right? Right at the end of that second stanza, where he writes, "And here was born a child," and that's when everything changes, when the unexpected infiltrates our world with joy and with hope. And then I like that, when he mentions Mary sang in this world below, right? We think of, or at least I do, I think of Mary's song, or I believe it's called the Magnificat, right? What she said when she found out that she was going to give birth to the Messiah. And this here now, like, he doesn't say what she's saying, but imagine the greater song that she would have sung having given birth just now. I feel like there's even more to it that we don't know. And there's like her song alone, right? It, like, the glorious joy of that pierces the world. It doesn't just pierce the world; it goes to the walls of paradise, because the true eucatastrophe has come into the world, and she's the one that was there right when it happened. And so, I mean, can you imagine that kind of feeling, right? As believers, we get a small glimpse maybe of that, but not to the degree that being there that night, being the closest human being to the divine ever, in physically speaking, in a way, right? That what her song would have been. I think about that when I see that line in here.
Yep, and not just close.
And I'm not even Catholic.
Well, there are plenty of. I could read you quotes from John Calvin and Martin Luther about respect for Mary. So
yes.
there's not a.
I know. I'm joking.
Don't need to be Catholic, but he does give the line, that I love. It says, "When the voice of mortal maid was heard, that was mother of heaven's king." Like, she's not just close geographically or location wise, and so that she hears the message of the angels. She is the mother of heaven's king.
Yes, right.
In this thing, which there's no human on earth that has ever been as close physically to Christ as his mother. And so, this is it's just such a powerful poem, and it's carried off, and I almost hate to say this, but I do like critiquing everything as our listeners are to know. But to this this poem is like everything. It's obviously a Christmas poem. It's obviously religious in a certain sense, but it's kind of the opposite of what makes so many Christian movies bad. It's, Tolkien has class when he's singing this. He's singing in a way, like you said, he doesn't tell you the words that she sang. He doesn't deign to do that. Scripture's there for that, to tell us when appropriate what the words are. But he's stirring in our hearts this idea of her singing as a counterpoint. I love to the Magnificat. I love you pointing out that. And then the echo of the world, which is the bells and to the walls of paradise.
I like that. The
echo of the world of her own song that rises up with her song. And then now finally the bells in paradise itself, not just the world. So the last, there's two sets of bells in the last stanza. The bells of paradise now ring with bells of Christendom. So there's the bells of Christendom here on earth, and there's the bells of paradise. And so he's calling to mind the eternal kingdom there. And so it's just beautiful. It's a wonderful, just a wonderful poem, obviously from the heart of a man that was deeply religious, but done with the craft that we've come to expect from Tolkien, from someone who can actually write and tell a story and move a heart, even about a thing that we've perhaps meditating on quite a bit in our life, since Christmas comes every year. And so, to have a fresh look at a thing which is, not new to us, in that the celebration of Christmas is not new. I love this. So obviously we're also fans of Tolkien. So it's unlikely that we're going to be too, it's going to not strike us.
It's unique too, in the sense that I think it's the only Christian-centric poem or song that Tolkien ever wrote. I don't believe there is a second one. I tried to do some research, and folks mentioned that, but I couldn't find the facts necessarily to back that up. Certainly, he mentions it in some of his writings. Obviously he speaks about it, and particularly in his letters, right? You would find it. But when it came to his creative writing, his poetry, his songs, his works, he doesn't write from a religious centric perspective, right? Not like this is my faith, and I'm going to write about it.
Famously, he says he's deliberately left out the religious out of Lord of the Rings, for example.
Good point.
Even though the world, what was that letter 151? I can't remember, but
I don't remember.
Anyway, he's deliberate about that, but like you said, this is a rare treasure in my mind, and it tells you, like, you can't take seriously people that would say that Tolkien's faith wasn't core when you find something like this. There's no way. He even uses the language that he uses in Lord of the Rings, like with the first two stanzas, for example, and the rest, and the beauty of the poem. But so here we see his faith interwoven with his craft of fantasy narrative.
Really the one time, and it's a beautiful thing to have. I'm so grateful that we have scholars who go out finding these things that we never know.
I know. I'm kind of envious. That'd be a job that'd be really fun.
And Wayne Hammond. So they do. Yeah. Who knows what else is out there? Hopefully it will eventually be found. But
right, and it's due to people like that we have a lot of those letters in the re-released letters of Tolkien that
they keep finding, they keep stirring, they keep
finding letters and obviously there's an end to them, but
so everybody, I hope you enjoyed this little sidestep into the Christmas season, as we as Michael and I believe there's really only one reason for Christmas, and it's not really Santa. So you can read this poem and figure it out if you can't quite get it. But check out the poem, bookmark it. Look, I'm not tooting my own horn, but my family loves it. We put it on every Christmas now, which is only the second time, but we'll put it on again. And we will have that. We'll have that additional treat from Austin with something else Christmassy from Tolkien, which you can probably guess what it is if you're like, but you don't know which thing particularly. But anyway, thanks everybody for joining us. Hey, Michael, I think I'm going to drop into. We weren't going to do an extended podcast, but I think I'm going to drop into something that you won't expect. So we'll jump into our extended podcast for our members, and hopefully they'll like it. If not, we'll just cut it out because I have the power.
We will wipe it from the face. Sounds good.
All right.
All right. Goodbye, freeloaders.